I work for a company called Tenable Network Security. They're a sponsor of this event. We make vulnerability scanning software. I get to work from home from Rhode Island, and I'm the product evangelist, which means I get to use their products, and then I get to tell people about them. So I have my own labs. They give me license to all their products. I make blogs, podcasts, webcasts, you name it, all telling people how to use their products in the real world. I'll talk about kind of how I ended up in that position as we go on through the presentation, but it's a great place to work, and they usually have an internship program for those that are interested. So, again, that company's right here in Columbia, Maryland, and you can download a trial, a home version of our software if you want to try it out. And as my title is the product evangelist for Nessus, it kind of draws up all these different images. But I really was searching for Nessus, and I found Jesus. So it kind of validates my title. This is the 9th year that we've been doing what we call a podcast, which started in 2005. We recently rebranded to Security Weekly. And just to give you a little background, we were called Paul.com. We had a trademark dispute, which took its toll in a number of different ways. It was not an easy battle to fight. However, when I came out of it, the way that I ended up dealing with it is that at Source Boston, I'll be giving a talk on how to hack the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. So it's kind of interesting. Sometimes they post those videos online, so if you can't make it to Source Boston, that information will be available. But I was working for a university at the time, happened to be Brown University, right where I live in my home state of Rhode Island. And they asked me to provide a monthly summary to all of the systems administrators that work there and tell them about security, tell them what's happening in the world of security, talk about the latest security breaches. And I did that for a while, and then we stopped for whatever reason, and I kind of had this void where I had to tell people about computers and information security. So podcasts were becoming popular around that time. We recorded episode 1 in October of 2005. Just at this conference on Thursday night, we recorded episode 367 of our podcast. So it's been a long road, and it's still a lot of fun. So if it wasn't, believe me, I wouldn't do it anymore. We've won some awards along the way. Most importantly, I want to show you sort of what our first podcast setup looked like. And ours was way worse than that. That was like advanced compared to what we had to record our first podcast. We had this like one little tiny microphone and an earbud for headphones. If we fast forward to today, we have an 1,100 square foot studio, 5 HD cameras, 3 sets, and a whole host of people that work for me now to produce the show, including 2 production assistants, one of whom is here helping stream this event live. We've got an audio engineer, and we're able to bring people on via Skype. You can see Joff there in the background, so that's kind of fun. So it's been a very interesting road about how we've gotten here. So I want to give you kind of a roadmap as to how you can do similar things. The first piece of advice that I have is surround yourself with smart people. You know, you saw my good friend Jack, the guy with the big long beard sitting next to me. He's, unbelievable insights into security. He's very much a curmudgeon. He's kind of cranky because he's kind of old, but but awesome person. John Strand, who's here with us today, is one of the smartest people I think I know in information security. He can actually remember all of the different letters, numbers, and characters that make up password hashes in his head, which is absolutely amazing. So by surrounding yourself with smart people, it helps you go further. These folks all help me. They all participate in my show. We do work together. We formed partnerships. So it's one of my most valuable pieces of advice. I've also done a lot of pen testing, or penetration testing, so not quite pen testing. But I started, in 2004, I started my own consulting company, and we weren't getting any work. And I had already started to surround myself with really smart people, such as Ed Scotus, and I went to Ed Scotus for advice. He's been teaching for SANS for a really long time, and he runs the CounterHack organization. And Ed said, you got to put yourself out there. He said, you got to write stuff. Give out information for free, and he said things will fall into place. And I took that advice to heart, and lo and behold, once I had started doing the podcast, once I had started writing some blogs, I started getting work and we started having a kind of successful business. And if we look at the way the organization is structured today, I can actually focus on the Security Weekly side of it, doing our weekly podcast, webcasts, interviews, technical segments, producing a live show. And we're strategically partnered with John Strand's company, Black Hills Information Security, to do penetration testing. I'm at the point now, which is kind of interesting. John pokes fun at me a little bit. I get to pick which projects I want to work on. So when I think a cool project has come along that I want to do the penetration test on, or it's in my area of expertise, that's the ones that I work on, which is really, really cool. I'm really lucky to be in that position. As you know, one of my loves is embedded device security. So it's progressed to the point where I kind of get to pick and choose. But how I got my start way early on, I started working for, I was a programmer actually for a little while. In college, I was actually a programmer. And then I worked my way to a .com startup called UWin. And what we did was online gaming in Europe, because in the US, there are still legislation that prevents online gambling or gaming. And it was there that the firewall administrator had gotten sick. Now, up to that point, I was pretty much strictly a programmer, and I knew a little bit about Linux and Unix. And I started there as a primarily Unix systems administrator working with Solaris, and then the firewall administrator got sick, so I had to figure out this firewall thing, and then we had to undergo an audit, so I had to do all of this security stuff, and lo and behold, I really liked the security stuff. I went to my first SANS conference, wrote a paper, and it kind of spiraled from there. I really kind of do stink at math. That's actually a funny story. In high school, my math scores were atrocious. Now, I'm not saying don't study math. Please, do your best at math, right? But I'm terrible at math. And my math scores were so low, but my computer interest was really high. So I was taking a computer programming course, basic computer programming course. And I said, well, I want to go then next semester, and I want to take the advanced programming class in Pascal, which nobody uses anymore, which shows my age. But, and the principal at the time was like, well, Paul, your math scores are really low. He's like, I tell you what, he's like, if you get an A in this basic computer course, I'll let you take the Pascal one. So I got an A in it, and it pretty much spiraled from there. My first computer was an Apple IIe to kind of show my age. The SANS Institute, a great place as a resource. If you go to the SANS website and you search for the reading room, the SANS reading room is a great place to get information, free information about computer security. So here's my little guide on how to become a hacker in 8 steps. Okay, we're going to talk about each one of those individually, and of course, the kind of surrounding this whole thing is to make sure that you do go to school. Although that, parents, close your ears, that always isn't a requirement. Like, one of the smartest people I know in the industry, one of the most brilliant wireless researchers who wrote the tool Kismet, which is used by everyone to do wireless analysis, never got a degree. I think he's since gone back and got his degree, but he didn't have a degree. He self-taught himself programming. But that's the exception more so than the rule. And we'll talk about number 8, about getting hacked, because a couple of weeks ago when I was on travel, of course, someone broke into our website. So we'll talk about that as well. So here's some things that will not make you a hacker or not get you started in information security. Now, I want to caution all of you, as you gain some skills in this area, people will come to you and ask you to do things. It's going to happen, right? My family members sometimes come to me and say, well, can't you just hack poor Billy's ex-wife's computer and get back at her? And I'm like, whoa. There's something called federal laws, and that's a violation of those. And I don't look good in an orange jumpsuit, so I am not going there. You have to realize that there are limits, right? Violating state, federal, or international law is not cool. Accessing a computer without authorization is a violation of federal law. If you do it overseas, it's a violation of international law. We do some work for international clients. One of them was getting blackmailed, and we have technology that helps companies track attackers, right? We call it offensive countermeasures. And they said, well, we really just want you to break into his iPhone. And we're like, well, you're in Sweden and they're in Italy, and it transverses, a server in Ukraine. So when you get permission from all those international authorities for us to do that, we're more than happy. And they're like, Yeah, we talked to the local police guys and they say it's okay. So we're like, no, not okay. So don't do that. Wearing black all the time, probably not. You know, you see a lot of black t-shirts. We had a bunch here. And taking that 8 steps to become a hacker seminar online is not going to get you there either. So one of the things that I like to talk about is the hacker spirit, right? So this is where I really date myself. Who's seen the movie War Games? Okay, a good number of people. If you're not raising your hand, make sure you watch the movie War Games. It's very important. I know you probably don't like homework, but from this presentation, you're going to have homework. One of your pieces of homework is to go watch the movies that I put up here, okay? The first one being War Games, of course. It's why my parents wouldn't let me get a modem around this time when the movie came out, because they were afraid I was going to cause global thermonuclear war. It's kind of funny now, because I do consulting for industrial control systems in SCADA companies, where you probably could cause global thermonuclear war, or something similar, right? Sneakers is probably one of the most relevant movies out there, really for just this one line that happens in the movie, where he says, it's all about the information, Marty, is the line in the movie, right? And it couldn't be more true today. The systems that we choose to protect, what are we protecting? Not the systems themselves, right? It's about the information that's on them. Tron just had some really cool bodysuits. I'm kind of a big fan of more of the old Tron than the new Tron, though I like the new Tron soundtrack, if you want a recommendation. So hackers, Angelina Jolie, need to say more, Swordfish, Halle Berry, you can kind of see how I rank the last 2. Some other ones, the Net, Matrix, Johnny Mnemonic. Johnny Mnemonic was an interesting one. Really the whole premise of the movie is that he doesn't want to have his brain formatted, which I thought was kind of interesting. So those are some other recommendations. And Takedown is a movie, read the book instead. It's about Kevin Mitnick, but the book is way better. Okay, so now you've watched all 10 movies that I've recommended. Hopefully not in one sitting, take some breaks. But what does it mean to be a hacker, right? It really has nothing to do with wearing rollerblades and running around New York City. It's more about being curious about technology. And we're in an interesting time now where technology is very easily accessible. Back when I still lived at home and I was trying to get into the computers and security, I had to go find a lot of this technology and play around with it. Now, technology has gotten so much smaller, it's so much less expensive, and it's much easier. Now, I bet my mom really wishes that we were in today and computers were smaller, because this was my computer hacking lab set up at home in my mom's living room. Okay, I'm sorry, parents, for showing this, but I'm trying to encourage here. So I asked for forgiveness rather than permission to set that up. But at the time, this is what a lab would look like, right? Virtualization was not a very popular technology. Embedded systems hadn't come as far along as they have now. So to set up a network of computers, you had to have a whole network of computers, which is what I set up. So I was working for the dot-com spin-off went away with the dot-com boom. I ended up working for the lottery company themselves. I had an opportunity to interview at Brown University. And they said, what experience do you have with Linux and Unix? And they said, specifically, what experience do you have with NFS? And I said, I run that at home. They're like, what? What do you mean? What do you mean you run that at home? Again, this is before virtualization and cloud computing. And I said, I have a network of systems at home. I said, I brought a picture of the systems that I have at home for you to look at. And they were like, wow, you really need to get out more. But I ended up getting the job, and it worked for me. But having a lab at home is probably one of the best pieces of advice that I could give you today, is to play around with technology. Get a hold of any technology you can. If people are getting rid of technology, like I said, you can use eBay, you can find computers really, really inexpensive. So get a lab at home. Most of the software that you need is free, right? I ran a lot of Linux on my systems. It's all free software. Also, finding some of the old software, right? In security, we like to take advantage of old software. Older software doesn't have the security patches that some of the newer software does. So a lot of times you have to find an old version of something to put it on a system and then see how you break into it. It's okay if the software is old. It's okay if the techniques are old. the core fundamentals haven't changed all that much. So oldapps.com is a great website to find old applications. Put them on a computer that's separate from everything else. Don't put it on mom's computer that she's doing the taxes on, please. No. Have your own lab, your own sandbox where you play around. A great way to do that is to use virtualization, right? VMware has some free versions available. QEMU, VirtualBox, and Zen are all great options. Essentially what it allows you to do is to take an operating system and install multiple operating systems on the same computer. Okay? So you can test those, you can bring those up, bring those down. It really, really helps your testing environment. I tend to run a lot on my own personal laptop. I take them with me wherever I go. I have virtual machines for all different kinds of testing. If I need to make another one, I can make a clone of that one, and then I have two without having to go acquire additional hardware. So it's also a critical skill that you'll use in any type of computer IT job that you get today. You have to have some familiarity with virtualization and the cloud, right? All cloud is virtualization on the internet. When you work in IT today, you have to have a solid understanding of those technologies and how they work. It's just how IT is done today. Okay, working in the IT department. Hey, does anyone watch the show, The IT Crowd? Anyone seen that show? Not as many people. Go look up The IT Crowd. Great, great show. So my favorite shows actually are The IT Crowd. And then Tiger Team was a show that was done by some friends of mine who work as penetration testers. And it didn't air for very long. Unfortunately, nor did Prototype This, which is kind of interesting about what mainstream television thinks of our profession. But Tiger Team was awesome. There's some great scenes in there. You know, they break into a car dealership and things like that, with authorization, of course. So it is very interesting. Very charismatic characters on that show. Prototype This was a Joe Grant show that ran on Discovery Channel. Battlestar Galactica is a little bit of a stretch, but Hack.5 is a great TV show. It's probably one of the most well-produced internet TV shows that focus a lot on hacking, but a lot on technology as well. They have a more general audience, but they will run segments on, you know, how to do wireless sniffing and man-in-the-middle attacks and get into the weeds of things. And then, you know, they have some other segments on how to build a gaming rig or upgrade RAM on a computer. So they kind of touch on both areas, but it's a very good show as well. And when you get older, check out a few episodes of Archer that talk about technology, but not until you're much older. But, you know, get a job. So I worked in, you know, the help desk in my first job. Before I started doing programming, a lot of my experience was working in the help desk. And I can't stress enough how important it is to work in the field, in computers, before you start moving into security, is to have some role, some job in some area of IT. Gaining that experience is critical. Look, in order to break into systems and then to defend those systems, you have to understand how the systems work. The best way to do that is to get a job in information security and start working at the ground up. So this is going to be very valuable experience. There are numerous, and I mean numerous, security conferences across the world that happen every week. It seems there is no shortage of information security conferences. Some of them are free, some of them are paid, some of them are annual, biannual. I mean, they have different focused topics. You can go to ones on just forensics. You can go to ones just on penetration testing. I attended 2 this year that were focused just on SCADA and critical infrastructure systems, the systems that run power plants and things of that nature. The point is to go. However, be responsible when you go. When you're of legal drinking age, of course, don't pass out at the conference like that young gentleman right there, who was one of our interns at the time, who got a little sleepy at the party. Now, you'll notice that there are people in the background that took the picture with him. One of those, the gentleman in the glasses that's kind of looking up into space there, that's Jeff Moss. He's the person that created the DEF CON conference and one of the kind of security celebrities in our field. And that was Darren's chance to meet Jeff Moss, the creator of DEF CON, and he was passed out at the party. So Be responsible when you go to conferences. Of course, now you're going to be going to conferences with your parents, but that's totally okay. It happens all the time. I love to see younger people getting involved with some of the security conferences. It's a great experience. Here's just a short list of some of the conferences that are happening out there. One of my favorite ones recently is DerbyCon. It happens in Louisville, Kentucky. It's an awesome, awesome conference. It's a very, very family-oriented conference as well. I've never seen a group of my friends in the community be so well-behaved when they get to DerbyCon. I don't know what it is about that environment, but the hotel loves us there. There are absolutely no incidents. The talks are fantastic. They have an introductory track for those just getting into the field. They have advanced tracks. They have all kinds of different events. It is just a fantastic conference. Probably my number one recommendation for a conference today is to go to DerbyCon, and that's not just because I'm friends with the founder, right? Like I said, as early as next week, I'll be speaking at SARS Boston as well, another excellent conference. Local groups. So in addition to attending conferences, right here in your state, really no matter where you are in the world, you can find some of the groups that I have up there on this slide. Okay, so the DEF CON groups, most states have a collection of people that attend DEF CON every year, and they create their own group. They usually go by their area codes. So our area code in Rhode Island is 401, so we have DC 401. They get together every month, someone does a presentation, you get to go hang out, you get to learn, it's completely free. The same thing with some of the larger organizations in terms of ISSA, ISACA. Those are also groups, once you get into the field, that you can join as well. 2600 groups are another informal group, very similar to the DEF CON groups. Also some other things that have come up recently. So OWASP is the Open Web Application Security Project. They also have a local group meeting. My good friend Patrick Laverty runs the Rhode Island OWASP chapter, and it's the same thing. You join the mailing list, and you get to attend a free presentation. Someone sponsors it, so you get food and drink, and you get to watch a presentation all for free, and mingle with people in your community. That's probably one of the most important things to do inside of your own community, is start attending these meetings that are completely free and let you network. B-Sides has a very interesting program. So Security B-Sides was created because essentially one year there was a bunch of people who submitted their talks to the Black Hat Conference, and they were rejected. And they're like, well, maybe it just wasn't what they're looking for. So we're going to do our own conference this year, and we're going to call it B-Sides. So they ran it at the same time as Black Hat, and they had a great time. They rented a house, and it was lots of fun. B-Sides today has grown into this global organization that's doing at least a conference or two every month in some part of the world. Largely they're free, run by volunteers. You can go to these conferences and hear experts speak, and they've got a presentation program, a getting into presenting program, where you're assigned a mentor who will help you with your topic, help you deliver your presentation, and they have an entire track of introductory talks. So B-Sides is a great organization. My good friend Jack Daniel that you saw in the beginning, he helps run the B-Sides organization. Also, there's infosecmentors.com, which is a very similar program. One of the things that I've always embodied is I love to read and listen to everything, right? I read blogs, I listen to podcasts, everything that I can get my hands on. So here are some tips for doing that. Weekly podcasts, I'll talk a little bit about some of the resources that we have over at Security Weekly. There are several others. The Risky Business podcast is awesome. My good friend Patrick Gray lives in Australia. He produces a weekly podcast. That's his job, right? I do it on the side. I have a full-time job. I do Security Weekly on the side. We do it weekly. But Patrick gets to work on his show all week. And it's really awesome because Patrick is a journalist by trade. So he really researches the people that are doing some cutting-edge research, and he brings them on the show for some in-depth interviews. We do the same thing, but Patrick tends to stay ahead of the curve. If something's breaking in the news, Patrick will have the interview. It does a much better job of preparing for the latest and greatest topics that are happening out there in the world of security and bringing those specific people on the show like the day after they just released some research. So Risky Business is awesome, as well as the other ones I have listed there done by some of my friends. You can get a complete list. I don't know why they call the website this, but it's called getmon.com. Still maintains a list of all security-related podcasts. And again, you'll have these slides to download at the end, I promise. On our show, we do something called technical segments. It kind of is the thing that separates our show out from a lot of the other ones, is we show you how to do something. You can find a list, if you go to that link, you can find a list of all of the technical segments that we've ever done and documented. When you visit that page, it gives you a written description of how to do what we're talking about, and has links to the audio and video for that segment, so you can watch and listen and learn what to do. If you don't know what ARP cache poisoning is, you can click to that link and you can watch our technical segment on it. So it's a great resource for everyone. I'm very proud to have that. Our most recent tech segment is how our website got defaced, which I'll talk more about later in the last section. Some interviews. There are 2 interviews. So I've interviewed well over 200 security professionals. Everyone from Bruce Schneier, all the way down to that really cool presentation that I saw at that really small security conference that I just had to bring the person on the show because they were so awesome. So from people just getting into the field to the luminaries in information security, we've interviewed pretty much all of them on the show. We're actually struggling to find people to interview on the show that we haven't before. The list is getting short, so out of all those interviews, I chose 2 for you to listen to as like your must-watch interviews from Security Weekly. The first was with Brian Snow, and I really couldn't tell you like the details of why, but that was just one of the most engaging interviews that our audience found, that I found, that we've done in a long time. Brian used to work for the NSA. He actually developed some of the crypto algorithms still in use today by the NSA. And we didn't talk solely about cryptography. We talked about security in general, and it's just a fantastic interview that you have to go watch. The other one, especially to set the stage for you to start looking for a job, is an interview that we did with Eve Adams, and that happened just recently, a couple of weeks ago. Eve's Twitter handle is Hacker Huntress. She does recruiting specifically for information security. She gave some fantastic tips on how to get into the field, how to do the interview, how to find the right job, how she finds the right people to fill the right positions. It's a great interview. The Brian Snow interview you can find right in the front page of our YouTube channel, and the link for Eve is up there as well. Okay, go ahead and read stuff. I really love the Kindle, and I really recommend the Kindle Paperwhite. That thing's awesome. My wife really loves that. There's some great books out there that you can read. Wireless Hacking Exposed. Lockpicking is something that you'll find at a lot of the hacker conferences. And you're like, what does that have to do with computer security? Lockpicking is really hacking at the end of the day. And Deviant Ollam wrote the Practical Lockpicking book. You get that in a lockpick set, and it's a lot of fun. It's the same principles that apply, though. If you don't have permission to go pick the lock, don't go pick the lock, okay? So don't go breaking into your parents' locked cabinets and whatnot to practice your lockpicking, please. So blogs, I subscribe to over 500 blogs, and I maintain and I keep that list up to date. If you visit that link up there, that is a consolidated list of all of the feeds that I follow. And like I said, I update that very frequently of all the different security blogs that I follow. I actually, in addition to doing the Security Weekly podcast, I do a weekly podcast for Tenable. So at least twice a week I'm covering the information security news that's happening. The only way I'm able to do that is with those feeds. My favorite book is The Cuckoo's Egg by Clifford Stahl. I was recently having dinner with Ron Gula and his wife Cindy. Ron's the CEO and founder of Tenable. And when they first met, Cindy was curious what Ron did. And Ron told her, well, if I told you, I'd have to kill you, because Ron actually did work for the NSA at the time. He did get a second date, which is kind of, I'm still amazed to this day. And on the second date, gave Cindy a copy of The Cuckoo's Egg. This book, more so than any other, really embodies that hacker spirit, I think. It's kind of like one you can't put down. Once you start reading it, you can't stop. So make sure you read that book if you already haven't. Writing and speaking. So I talked that I'm speaking at Source Boston. I don't know why I did this, but the first time I ever spoke at Source Boston, I was 1 week out of ACL knee surgery. It was not a good idea. I only did it because I had to. So maybe don't put that much of a priority on speaking at conferences. But when I talk about Source Boston, I'm kind of reminded of that story. This year I'll be going there, hopefully crossing my fingers healthy, right, to give a talk at Source Boston. Write about things. Perhaps one of the best examples I could give of this is Richard Balick. He's run a blog for several years now, and there was a good period in time where Richard's blog is called the Dow Security Blog, TAO security.blogspot.com, and Richard would write about his experiences with FreeBSD. He would say, hey, I just configured a FreeBSD system to do this, and here's the step-by-step guide on how to do that. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool, I can use that. But it was also serving as a guide for Richard. And that's what our technical segments are, right? A lot of times I'll find myself on a penetration test and I'm like, how did I do that before? And I'll come up with our wiki. It's your documentation on how you do things. And don't be afraid to write about them. Because something that you discover may have a different angle. It may be solving a problem that someone else is having. And your blog is going to start getting more traction. So this is a fantastic way to put yourself out there. When we hire people at Tenable, especially in research positions, the first thing I do is I go see if they have a blog. And Ron Gould and myself both go read those blogs of the potential researchers. I want to see what you've been researching. I want to see how you can write, how you can communicate, how you can take technical problems and address them, and what's your level of understanding of technical knowledge as well. So make sure that you have a blog. It doesn't really matter what you write about as long as you're interested in it. Submit articles. This can be a great one too. If you've written a great blog article, you've got an interest in writing an article about a particular topic, don't be afraid to shop it around. If you don't know where to shop it around, send me an email. My email address will be up at the end of this presentation. We talked a little bit about submitting to a conference. Don't think this is something you can't achieve or attain. Like I said, there are great programs, especially in B-sides, to help you get practice and deliver a good presentation at a security conference. Social networking is a necessity, I think, in this business, in this industry. We use it very heavily. Of course, you have to be careful how you use social networking. Some of my friends and family are like, use Twitter and Facebook and all these different things. I'm like, yeah, it's part of my job. It's actually part of my job to maintain the Tenable Twitter account, which is kind of interesting. Now, most of my family, they have no idea what Twitter is. Absolutely no idea. They're like, what is Twitter? A couple of them started to coming around and getting into it, but part of my job is using Twitter, is using Google+, is experimenting with new technologies in order to get the message out there. For your own personal usage, it's extremely important. I mean, there is a community inside of Twitter that represents computer security and hacking. And to be a part of that, you need an account and use it appropriately. I've seen a lot of people not use it appropriately, and be aware of the risk that everything that you put out there is made public immediately, and it's public forever. Even if you remove it, it's still public. Someone has it somewhere where they've sent it out. So by all means, use social media, but realize that it's on the internet forever. I'd say I said all that. It's easy to do, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So we do have, it's still kind of branded as our old brand, Paul.com. We're working on getting that switched over. In fact, that may already be switched over. But we do have Facebook pages that we maintain for various events, a fan page, and things like that. Okay. Get hacked. I can't tell you how many security professionals I interview, and I always ask everyone the same first question. I ask them, how did you get your start in information security? And a lot of times people come back as part of their story and they tell me, well, I had this system and it got hacked. And I was so intrigued by the hack that I just had to get into this field and I had to make it my job. So, I've had lots of different stories. So most recently, one of the things that I actually get to do as part of my job at Tenable and Security Weekly is apparently I get to go to warm places in the winter. So this year they said, Paul, we have some experience with SCADA devices, the devices that help operate, water plants and power plants and things like that. They're like, you have a background in that, and we really want to focus on that this year. So we want to focus some of your efforts in presenting and going to conferences with SCADA. I'm like, okay. They're like, the first one that's happening this year is S4, and it's in Miami in January. I'm like, oh, hold on, twist. I think I can make that one. Then they're like, well, the next one is, you're going to be there for a while, but it's in Orlando on Disney property, in March. I'm like, oh, yeah, twist again, twist again. So I don't know how that happened. So I spent a lot of time in Florida this winter, and I took my family to Disney. Like, we went to Disney World as part of Paul's job, which was just really, really great opportunity. But while I was out there, actually, the day my family was getting there, that morning I woke up. And sometimes the first thing I do before I'm fully awake is I get my phone and I check my email and I check Twitter before I even get out of bed. Before I even get out of bed, I see a tweet. Hey, it looks like SecurityWeekly.com is defaced. Well, that didn't start a very good day in sunny Orlando, Florida. We immediately got some resources on it and started figuring out what happened. I'm very lucky that we were able to pull 2 resources from consulting, 2 very, very smart people. Again, it goes back to surround yourself with smart people who helped me with the incident and analyze what happened. The long and the short of it is, I issued a web developer an account to help me build the website. The web developer is not a security person, he's a web developer. On my WordPress instance, I had a security control that was basically making you enter a password before you could enter your password. So it's not 2-factor authentication, but you have to enter this password before you even get to the screen to enter your username and password for WordPress. When I upgraded WordPress, I forgot to put that security control back in. What had happened was someone had guessed the password, logged into our WordPress instance, and defaced the page. I found that after some forensics analysis, it was our web developer, and his password was change-me123, because he never changed the default password that I set for him when he logged in. So we have a job opening at Security Weekly for a web developer. Anyone who's interested can contact me after the presentation. So what we did as a result of that incident was, I'm like, look, I'm not going to hide the fact that our site got defaced. In fact, it's already public, right? Yes, we made a mistake. We should hang our heads in shame. We're security professionals. But it happens sometimes. So what we did was we went on the show, and we did an entire segment about how our website was defaced. I told them the time. I said, someone logged into our site at 6:30 in the morning. We know that because we've done forensics on it. I said, our site was back up and running at 11, and I described the way that I was able to restore the backup. I said, here's what we know what happened. Then there's a whole section. Here's what we did immediately to fix the problem. We put the security control back in place. We changed everyone's passwords. We made sure that all our software was updated, a complete software update on our system. Then we said, here's what we're going to do in the future. Here's what we're going to do better so that this doesn't happen again. And it listed out all the things that we were going to do. 100% of the feedback that we got from the community, who can be very harsh at times, was completely positive. Everyone said, thank you guys for being so, we wish everyone would release this level of information. People came in with recommendations. We really liked your segment. Thank you for being upfront and honest about it. So I'm not saying you should try to get hacked, but as far as the value of the learning experience is really high, right? Now, it's costly. Our website was down for 3 hours, and it's a little embarrassing, but no one's perfect. It's all about sometimes how you react to something more so than what happened in the first place. So, some of the other things that we like to do is computer destruction. This slide just happened to get stuck in there. It's nice to blow off steam sometime. We've been very creative on the show and how we've destroyed things. We've used potato guns, thermite, garden tools, and things of that nature. So it can be lots of fun with all that old computer equipment we had laying around. As you have the joy, hopefully someday, of having your own kids, and you realize that they're just like you and like to hack and cause destruction. This is a picture of my 1-year-old son this morning. So happy to be laying in a pile of Cheerios. Some things, you pass on to your kids, and I think that destruction phase, I definitely did. He is going to be, both my kids are going to be hackers. I'm actually very frightened for what's going to ensue as they get older. A version of the presentation is there. It may not be this exact one. I will update that exact link, but there is a version of this presentation there now. SecurityWeekly.com/gettingstarted.pdf. So write that down. That is where I will put the latest copy of this presentation. If you pull it down now, it's very similar. I just made some updates today to it. You can email me. My email address is paul@securityweekly.com. Our internship program, I said was full when I came to this conference because we have a lot going on. We don't have a lot of cycles to take on new interns. However, There was one young lady who showed very much promise, and we think we're going to let her into the internship program anyhow because she was just so excited and enthusiastic. So if that's kind of my last piece of advice is be enthusiastic about this field and be excited about it. Make sure it's something you love, and then you don't have to work a day in your life. Any questions? Questions for me? No? None?
No questions? Oh, yes.
Yes.
You have a question?
Just one. You put on the WordPress, the double password. Is that like an extension you use, or is that something that somebody knows to put it in?
No, it's a great question. I'll repeat it for everyone. When I put that extra password that you had to enter when you're configuring your WordPress site, it's actually a .htaccess file. If you search for WordPress, like login, htaccess, there's probably at least a dozen websites that will describe for you how to implement that security control. It's a very common thing. Basically, it'll tell you how to create that file, what to put in that file. Then, when you go to and where to put the file, right? Then when you go to your WordPress instance, you'll see this little dialog box that'll come up. It's a very similar looking dialog box to when you log into like your Linksys router, and it'll ask you for a username and password that you've set. Once you've entered that username and password, then your WordPress login screen will come up. Because WordPress is so widely attacked, people are just guessing passwords. And just that small little barrier will help prevent the average everyday attackers who are just trying to deface the number of websites that as they can to get higher rankings on a site called Zone H, which tracks how many websites you can deface. So, great question.
When your site got hacked, do you list in the article the tools that you used to find out who it was?
Yeah, so we used a tool called WP Scan to find some of the vulnerabilities in WordPress and fix some of the things in WordPress. As far as the tools we used to find out who it was, we really just looked in the logs. I mean, it was all just general Linux knowledge, which I think goes back to why it's so important to work in the field, because there really were no special tools other than what's available in Linux to look at your logs, to review the password hashes, review the accounts within WordPress. So it's a great question, but it really just came down to basic forensics on a Linux device.
Other questions? All right.
Oh, along the lines of special tools, Joff, who helped me with the incident response, he used, I'll have to look it up and send it to you because I can't remember the name, a tool that uses the graphics cards, processors, and memory to break password hashes. So he actually brought that system online. He had this stuff put together, and he's like, I brought it online just for this one. So he pulled the password hashes. He ran some special software. We interviewed the guy that wrote it too. And it knows how to use the processors on the graphics cards to break the hashes. And that's what he did. He tried to break all the hashes, and he found one that was change.me123. And that's how we traced it back to that account. So there were special tools in use, and I can't remember what it's called. You have to email me, and I'll tell you.
So to break the hashes, they compared it to a rainbow table?
It was, I believe it was, I don't remember which one, if he used rainbow tables or if he had just a straight hashcat. That's what it's called, hashcat. And it does not use rainbow tables. It actually attacks the hash directly. And WordPress hashes are attackable like that because of the way that they're constructed. So if you search for hashcat on our site, you'll find the interview that we did with the author. He explains everything about the software.
Other questions? No? Well, then I think one we need to give
Yep,
another.
go ahead.
Yes.
In your opinion, what is the best sorting order?
The sorting? In terms of like, what are you sorting? Like when I sort, I'm a real bad programmer, so I just use bash, and then I pipe it to the sort command. That's like the extent of my program. I've done, my background is in programming. Most of it's done in scripting now, and when I need to do any heavy lifting, I rely on my really smart friends. But one of the projects where thankfully I didn't have to worry about choosing a sorting algorithm, but one of the projects I worked on was called Honeyports, and we distributed to the blue teams. And essentially what Honeyports does is it listens on a port. Anyone that makes a full connection to that port, which no one should be making a connection to that port because there's nothing listening on that port. So when someone does, it takes their IP address and it writes a firewall rule and blocks them. So that was in play with the Blue team, and that's a Python script that runs on Linux OS 10 and Windows. It's cross-platform to do that, and it keeps growing, and certain people are contributing to it. Someone from OpenBSD contributed a patch so it run on OpenBSD. So that's some of the programming things that I'm working on. But I leave choosing algorithms to people who really know how to do software engineering. Yes, question.
Given all the zero-day vulnerabilities that are out there, do you feel comfortable doing online banking?
I never feel comfortable doing online banking, right? But you always have to weigh the risks, and that's one thing that hopefully you'll learn as you go through this industry is, yeah, there's a risk, but there's a certain convenience associated with it. However, I don't do online banking from certain areas. I don't do it from an open Wi-Fi in this conference. I don't. My wife knows not to do the online banking from work. We do it from home, from the same computer with the same browser, and you have to kind of balance your risks like that. Would I have a mobile app from my bank that let me do online banking? Absolutely not. Those are notoriously have bad security. So you kind of it's kind of a yes and no answer, right? In certain circumstances, sure we use online banking, but not not at a conference or when we're traveling.